Ever get that feeling like English words are playing hide and seek in your brain? One minute they're there, the next, poof, vanished,
Happens to the best of us.
obviously. And judging by the mountain of research you guys sent in, it sounds like a lot of us are in the same boat. So today we're going deep, a real deep dive into this whole forgetting thing, why it happens, and more importantly, how to make those words stick around for good.
It's funny. We always see forgetting as like a bad thing, but our brains are actually wired to forget.
Really?
Yeah, think of it as like a natural decluttering system. If we held on to every single thing, we'd be completely overloaded.
Okay, that makes sense. But I guess when it comes to language learning, those are the things we kind of want to keep right.
Exactly.
So how does forgetting actually work, especially like with new vocabulary?
Well, forgetting helps us prioritize. It makes space for the things that really matter to us. And that's where understanding long-term memory comes in.
Long-term memory.
Yeah, it's not just one big storage unit. It's more like a super complex filing system with different sections for different types of information.
Okay, so like what kind of sections?
Well, you get semantic memory. That's where we store general knowledge, vocabulary definitions. And then there's episodic memory, which is all about our personal experiences.
So if I remember the definition of serendipity, that's semantic.
Right.
But if I remember that time I totally butchered using serendipity at a party and everyone laughed, that's episodic.
Exactly.
And I'm probably going to remember the word better because of that funny story.
You got it. Vivid memories, especially those with some emotion attached to them, those tend to stick around a lot longer. So one big takeaway here, connect those new words to your life. Create stories, make them memorable.
Love it. Now, the research you sent mentioned something called forgetting factors. Like, why do some words disappear so quickly even after we've studied them? What are some of the main culprits we need to watch out for?
One of the biggest is shallow encoding. Think about cramming for a test. You might remember the information long enough to pass, but a week later, poof, it's gone.
Yes, the classic cram session. We've all been there.
Right, and that's because you haven't really encoded it into your long-term memory by jotting something down on a sticky note and then the note disappears.
So it's not just about seeing the word, it's about how we process it.
Absolutely. Another big roadblock is learning words in isolation. No context. Imagine trying to remember the word sparkling without knowing what it's describing.
It could be champagne, someone's personality, a clean countertop.
Exactly. Without context, the word just floats around in our minds. No anchor.
Like trying to learn a dance move with no music.
You need the rhythm. You need the context to understand how it all fits together.
Totally.
I once tried to learn a bunch of Spanish verbs just from lists. Ugh, it was so boring. It wasn't until I started using them in actual conversations, seeing them in action in books, that they started to stick.
So connecting words to real-life situations, actually using them, that's super important.
It's key. And that brings us to another major forgiving factor, lack of repetition and space practice. Our brains need to see information multiple times spaced out to really solidify those connections.
It's like practicing an instrument, right? One frantic session before a recital is not going to cut it. It's the consistent practice over time that makes the music flow.
Exactly. And it's not just about passively repeating the words over and over. We need to actively engage with them. Use them in sentences, write them down, even sing them. Make them yours.
Now, speaking of making words our own, I'm curious about all the different strategies out there to boost retention. What are some of your favorites from all the research you've been digging into?
It's amazing, isn't it? There are so many different approaches out there. Some people love flashcards. Others are all about those mnemonic devices. And then you've got visual learners who need those images to really make things stick.
I'm definitely a flashcard fan, especially those digital ones with the spaced repetition. It's like having a little vocabulary coach right in my pocket reminding me to review those words right when I'm about to forget them.
Spaced repetition is a total game changer. It's all about revisiting information just as it starts to fade. Keeps those brain pathways active.
Exactly. It's like giving your brain a little nudge saying, hey, this is important, don't let it slip away. But besides flashcards and spaced repetition, what else caught your eye in all that research?
Active recall is a big one. It's all about forcing your brain to retrieve information without peeking at the answer. Really helps solidify those neural pathways.
So instead of just reading a definition over and over, I should try to remember it from memory first.
Exactly. It's like a workout for your brain. The more you challenge yourself to recall, the stronger those memory muscles get.
And that ties back to what we were saying before about using those words actively, whether it's writing, speaking, or even just thinking in English.
Absolutely. The more you integrate those words into your daily life, the less likely they are to fade away. It's like learning to ride a bike. You can't just read about it. You got to get on and practice.
Now, you mentioned mnemonic devices earlier. Those are like memory tricks, right? I've heard of people using acronyms, rhymes, even making up little stories to remember words.
Exactly. Mnemonic devices are all about association, linking that new information to something you already know well. And the sillier and more vivid, the better.
I've actually used those before, and they can be surprisingly effective. I once had to learn the French word for butterfly papillon. I created this crazy image in my head of a butterfly with a giant pea on its wings flying around a pile of pillows.
Sounds crazy, but hey, if it works.
It did. It was ridiculous, but it totally worked.
That's the beauty of it. The more personal and creative you get, the better it sticks in your memory.
And the research you sent really highlighted how important that personalization is, especially for language learning.
Yeah, if you're passionate about cooking, for example, don't just learn the basic words like apple. Dive deeper. Learn words like caramelized julienne de glaze. Connect those new words to what you already love, and they'll resonate so much more.
It's like creating your own personalized vocabulary toolkit tailored to the things you actually want to talk about.
Exactly. Instead of tackling some generic vocabulary list, build one based on your hobbies, your favorite movies, your dream travel destinations. Those words will become so much more meaningful and way easier to remember.
Makes total sense. Now, we've talked about a bunch of specific techniques, but I think there's another layer here that often gets overlooked: motivation and mindset. You got to actually want to learn these words, right?
It's huge. Motivation is like the fuel that keeps us going, especially when we hit those inevitable bumps in the road. But it's not just about wanting to learn. It's also about cultivating the right mindset.
Okay, so let's talk mindset. What does that look like when it comes to language learning?
One really important piece is developing a growth mindset. It's all about believing that your ability to learn and remember isn't set in stone. It's something you can grow and develop with effort and the right strategies.
So instead of thinking, oh, I'm just bad at languages, I should be thinking I'm learning and improving every day.
Exactly. It's about embracing those challenges, those moments when you forget, as opportunities to learn and grow. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're actually super valuable learning tools. They show us where we need to focus our energy.
I love that reframing. Mistakes aren't failures, they're feedback.
And one of the most powerful things you can do is tap into your intrinsic motivation. What truly excites you about learning English? Is it connecting with people from other cultures, reading amazing literature, understanding your favorite songs?
When I was learning Italian, it wasn't just about being able to order a pizza in Rome. I fell in love with Italian cinema, and that passion really fueled my learning in a way that textbooks never could.
That's the magic of intrinsic motivation. It turns learning from a chore into a pleasure.
It's like anything in life, right? If you're passionate about something, you're naturally going to put more effort into it and enjoy the process so much more.
Exactly. And speaking of enjoying the process, we can't ignore the role of technology these days. All that research you sent on language learning apps, online dictionaries, podcasts, it's amazing how many resources we have at our fingertips.
It's a little overwhelming, to be honest. I'm a bit of a language learning app junkie myself, and there are just so many cool tools out there. But where do we even begin? How do we navigate this digital landscape without getting totally lost? Yeah, it really is amazing how much tech has changed the language learning game. But I think there's a danger of getting too caught up in all the bells and whistles and kind of forgetting about the fundamentals.
Totally agree. Tech can be an amazing tool, but it's just that a tool. It's not going to magically make you fluent. The real magic comes from using those tools in a smart way and combining them with solid learning strategies.
So it's not about throwing away those flashcards and textbooks. It's more about finding that sweet spot where tech enhances our learning, right?
Right. Think of it this way. You wouldn't expect to become a chef just by binge-watching cooking shows, would you? You still have to get in the kitchen, chop those veggies, experiment with flavors, maybe even burn a few dishes along the way.
I love that analogy. So how can we actually use technology effectively without falling into that trap of just passively consuming?
Well, start by thinking about your goals. What are you hoping to achieve? Do you want to learn more words, improve your pronunciation, get more comfortable with conversations? Once you have those goals in mind, you can pick apps and resources that really align with what you want to work on.
So instead of just downloading every shiny new language app, I should be more deliberate about which tools I choose, ones that fit my learning style and what I want to accomplish.
Exactly. And once you've chosen your tools, think about how you can use them actively. Let's say you're using flashcards. Don't just passively swipe through them. Actually challenge yourself to recall the meaning of a word before you flip it over.
Right, it's about making that extra effort to really engage your brain, to think about the words and how they connect to other things I know.
Exactly. And don't underestimate those good old-fashioned resources like dictionaries and grammar books. They can give you a really strong foundation, especially when you combine them with more interactive tools.
So it's really about finding that balance between different approaches. Tech can give us that extra boost, but we still have to put in the work, the effort to really make those words our own.
That's a great point. And speaking of making words our own, I think it's time to talk about something we haven't addressed directly, but that's kind of woven throughout all this research, the idea of forgetting not as a failure, but as a feedback loop.
A feedback loop. That's interesting. Usually when I forget a word, I just get annoyed with myself. How can forgetting be a good thing?
Well, think about it this way. Every time you forget a word, your brain is giving you valuable information, saying, hey, maybe we need to revisit this one, try a different approach, make it more memorable.
So instead of beating myself up, I should be asking myself, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I tweak my strategy so I remember this word next time?
Exactly. It's all about experimenting and figuring out what works best for you. The more you pay attention to those moments when you forget, the more you'll understand how your memory works and which techniques are most effective.
Wow, that's such a cool way to look at it. Instead of being afraid of forgetting, I can actually use it to become a better learner.
That's the spirit. And there's something else about forgetting that I find really fascinating. Sometimes even when we think we've completely forgotten something, it's actually still there somewhere in our long-term memory, just waiting to be reactivated.
Wait, are you saying those English words I struggled with months ago could still be hiding out my brain somewhere?
It's totally possible. There's a difference between losing a memory entirely and just having trouble accessing it. Sometimes all it takes is a little reminder, a nudge, or a change in context to bring that word back to the surface. Like when you have that tip of the tongue feeling, you know the word, but you just can't quite grab it,
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. It's amazing how our brains work.
isn't it? So next time you forget a word, don't panic. See it as a chance to try out new learning strategies, get creative with those memory techniques, and have faith in your brain's incredible ability to learn and adapt.
This has been such a mind-blowing deep dive. We've explored the science of memory, busted some myths about forgetting, and discovered so many awesome strategies for making those English words stick. I feel inspired and ready to put all this into practice.
That's what we love to hear. It's all about taking action, experimenting, finding what works for you. And remember, language learning is a journey, not a destination. Enjoy the process, be patient with yourself, and keep exploring this amazing world of language.
What a fantastic way to wrap up this episode. And before we sign off, I have a little challenge for all of you listening out there. Pick one new strategy we talked about today, whether it's flashcards, mnemonics, anything, and commit to it for a week. Just see what happens. I bet you'll be surprised by the results.
I love that challenge. And remember, have fun with it. The more you enjoy the process, the more likely you are to stick with it and see those amazing results.
So well said. All right, everyone, that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, happy learning.